Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome, all of you, on this 14th night, the 19th of Safar, and the 4th night of our road to the 40th day. For 13 nights we have proven that the chain of witness runs unbroken, from Abel to a child in Sham. Tonight we ask the question waiting on the other side of it all. Is the chain past? Is it a beautiful museum we visit and then leave, or is it still being forged, link by link, in our own lifetime, with names we have spoken aloud and faces we have seen on the glass of our phones? And then we walk, with a blind old man, the first road ever taken to that grave. Quiet in your heart, and if you're with us live, a quick like near the start quietly helps these nights find a wider circle. Let us begin. Bismillah. We open with the Word of God. Please give your attention to tonight's verses. Among the believers are men, true what they pledge to God. Some have fulfilled their vow, and some are still waiting. Let us listen.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And we did not send you except as a mercy to all the worlds. Qur'an, Sūrah al-Anbiya, the chapter of the prophets, 21, verse 107.
God does not forbid you regarding those who did not fight you over religion and did not drive you from your homes, that you be kind and just to them. Indeed, God loves the just. God only forbids you regarding those who fought you over religion and drove you from your homes and supported your expulsion, that you take them as allies. Qur'an, Surah al-Mumtahana, the chapter of the examined woman, 60, verses 8 to 9.
And now our couplets, poetry to bring the theme home to the heart. Let the words settle.
The chain is not broken. Every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala, and Husayn remains forever the master of the witness. But do not tell me that a witness belongs only to yesterday, pressed between the pages of books we kiss but never become. Do not tell me that the road ended where Karbala's death settled, or where the chains of Sham finally fell silent. No, the road is still beneath our feet. Abel still bleeds every time truth is envied. The prophets still call every time power demands silence. Husayn still stands wherever dignity refuses to bow. And Zainab still speaks whenever fear commands the tongue to rest. The chain was never forged to hang in history's museum. Each generation must become its next link. Some are summoned with a sword in hand, some with pen in hand, some with a cradle, some with a courtroom, some with nothing but a heart unwilling to sell what it knows to be true. Not every witness dies, but every witness must first surrender the fear of dying. For witness begins long before blood reaches the earth. It begins the moment comfort loses its throne, the moment truth becomes more precious than tomorrow. We have learned to weep for names the centuries have already crowned. How easy it is to love those whose victory history has confirmed. How difficult it is to recognize the witness who still walks among us, whose funeral has not yet become a chapter, whose sacrifice is still argued over, whose name the powerful would rather erase than engrave. The world has always preferred its witnesses when they can no longer speak. Living witnesses make demands. Dead ones can be admired without imitation. Yet the chain asks more. It asks whether we can see before the historians write, before the monuments rise, before the verdict becomes fashionable. Can we recognize truth while it's still costly? Can we honor sacrifice before the world permits us to? Can we become what we praise? The chain is not broken. It runs from the first innocent to every soul who chooses God over comfort, justice over applause, truth over survival. Its links are not made of iron but of conviction. And somewhere even now another link is being forged, perhaps not on a battlefield but in a prison cell, perhaps not before an army but before a judge, perhaps not with a cry that shakes nations but with a quiet refusal to betray what is sacred. The chain passes through every age. It has reached ours, and it does not ask us whether we are ready to die. It asks something far more unsettling. Are we willing to live as witnesses? Should God decree that witness is what this generation requires of us?
I now invite our speaker, Shaykh Shabbir Hassanally, for tonight's sermon, The Living Witness, on the martyrs of our own lifetime and the chain of witness that did not stay in the books but is still being written. The sermon will flow into the Maqtal. Tonight, he walked towards Husayn, the story of Jabir and Atiyah, the first pilgrims to reach the grave on the 40th day, and will close with a supplication. Let us hold our stillness through all of it. Please welcome Shaykh Shabbir Hassanally.
I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim walad-dallin, sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Abu Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you from us all is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Husayn, and upon Ali the son of Husayn, and upon the children of Husayn, and upon the companions of Husayn. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, last night we set a seed into the ground, and tonight we've come back to find what it's grown into. And it has grown into something far larger than a mere plant. It's grown into a question about the age that we live in. We ended the 13th night on a single sentence, and I asked you to carry it home and sleep with it under your pillow. You don't have to die a witness, but you must be willing to. We had walked, all of us together, all the way through the grades of witness, the battlefield and the hereafter, the scholar at the desk, the mother in her childbed, the honest man on his road, and the smallest witness of all, the little one in the ruin of Sham. And we drew from the whole long night one freeing and one demanding truth, and tied them together. The gate is enormous, and everyone is invited through it, and the willingness is on our part. Now hold on to that. And let me ask you the question that's been waiting on the other side of this since the very first night of this series. We've spent 13 nights proving from the Qur'an, from the Imams, from the jurists, from the philosophers, that the witness is real, that the chain of witness runs unbroken from Abel, the first man wronged for his faith, all the way down through the prophets and the Imams, all the way to a 3-year-old in a roofless cell in Damascus and beyond. We have called that chain unbroken. But here's the question. Is it past? Is the chain a closed thing? Perhaps a beautiful museum we visit on these nights and then leave behind when the lights come up? Or is the chain still being forged, link by link, in our very own lifetime, with names that we have spoken aloud, with faces that we have seen on the glass of our phones in our very pockets? I want to say the answer very plainly at the top of this night so that you can watch it gather its terrible weight as it comes to be. Martyrdom is not history. It is happening now. The witnesses did not stay in the books. They walked out of the chronicles and into our decades. And tonight we're going to meet them. The generation that held a frontier for 8 years. The chain of men in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Iran. And of course, there are martyrs all over the world. I'm focusing on this region for the moment. All of whom were struck down one after the other across the span of our own adult lives. The scientists murdered in their cars with their children beside them. The children of Gaza, the children of Lebanon, a whole generation of witnesses broadcast into our hands. And some months ago in Tehran, the Wali Amr himself, the guardian of the affairs of the Muslims, martyred. And his last word to the world, a verse of the Qur'an. And here's the takeaway of the night, and I'm not going to dress it up because the whole of Shahada, witness, has been walking toward it. To see these witnesses for what they truly are, to recognize the chain when it runs right past your front door, is the test of whether you understood a single one of these 13 nights that has come before. It's one thing to weep for a witness who died 1300 years ago. The chronicles have done the hard work for us. The love is safe. The verdict is settled. The shrine is built. It's another thing entirely to look at a man martyred a few months ago, last month even, in a war the newspapers you read called something else, and to know him for what he is. That recognition is the examination this whole series has been preparing you to sit. And tonight is the paper. Let us begin. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move on to the first point, the two things we do at once.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So we open every one of these nights in the same way, with the salutation or a portion of the salutation of Ziyarat Ashura, the peace upon Abu Abdullah and upon the souls that alighted in his courtyard. We've said it so many times that it can slide past us like a habit. Tonight I'm going to ask you to stop on it, because the text we open with is, all by itself, the constitution of everything else that we're going to say. Listen to what Ziyarat Ashura actually trains the tongue and the heart to do. It does two things in a single breath. With one breath it greets. It turns toward Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, and toward the wronged, and it pledges itself to them. And with the same breath it disavows. It turns away from the throne that wronged them. Hear the disavowal in its own words. And this is, of course, from Ziyarat Ashura. The references are always in the write-up. It says, "May the mercy of God be distant from the people who laid the foundation of oppression and injustice against you, O people of the house. And may the mercy of God be distant from the people who drove you from your station and removed you from the ranks in which God had placed you. And may the mercy of God be distant from the people who slew you." And then two lines on, the other section, the Pledge of Allegiance, what we call the Tawalla. "O Abu Abdullah, I am at peace with whoever is at peace with you, and at war with whoever wages war against you until the day of resurrection." Two motions in a single breath. Stand with the wronged. Turn away from the throne that wrongs them. This is not a slogan, and it's not just a mood. For Muslims, especially Shia Muslims, living in occupation, psychological, real, whichever, under sanctions, under surveillance, or like so many of us, in the diaspora of an empire whose flag flies over our own streets, this is the Constitution. It is the text that teaches the believer to hold two things at once and never let go of either: solidarity with the oppressed and disavowal of the oppressor. Not hatred of a people, disavowal of a system. And hold carefully onto that distinction, because the whole night turns on it. And now I'm going to set a hinge in the floor of this room. And I'm going to ask you to remember exactly where it is, because in about an hour, I'm going to come back and stand on it. You have been saying the tabarra of the ziyarah for 1400 years. Every Thursday, every Ashura, every time you turn to greet Imam al-Husayn, you have disavowed the oppressor, never the bystander, never the nation, never a people, only the throne and the foundation of injustice that it was built upon. So when, later tonight, we come at last to the cry our own community raises in the streets of the world, the cry that is the single most weaponized and most misunderstood sentence we ever say out loud, I'm going to ask you to recognize it for what it actually is. Because it is not a new thing, and it is not a hateful thing. It is this, the tabarra of Ziyarat Ashura, stepped down off the page and spoken aloud in different languages. Hold on to that. We will return to stand upon it. We begin where the witness of our own lifetime begins, not with the cry in the street, but on a frontier that a whole generation chose to hold. So first we look at the roots, a generation that held the line. 2 nights ago, on the 12th night, we read together the supplication that Imam Zayn al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, composed for the people of the frontiers, the Du'a Ahl al-Thughur. And we drew from it the idea of murabata, the holding of the line, the guarding of the seam between the oppressor and the oppressed, as a grade of worship in its own right. I told you that night that the frontier holder was, for the moment, a figure in a prayer, a beautiful abstraction. Tonight I have to make him flesh, because in our own century, a whole generation of young men turned that abstraction into a war they did not start. And then, and this is the heart of it, they wrote down why. So let me set it without a single ornament, because the facts are heavy enough to need none. In September of 1980, the regime of Saddam Hussein invaded the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was not a war Iran chose, it was an invasion Iran answered. It lasted 8 years. It cost a generation, young men and boys who lied about their age to get to the front, and old men who would not stand behind. The world armed the aggressor, and you will hear on another night exactly which capitals sold Saddam exactly which weapons, and which of them knew he was using poison gas while they kept the lines of credit open. Tonight, that's not our subject. Tonight, our subject is the men who held the line, and what they understood themselves to be doing while they held it. Because they did not understand it as soldiers usually understand a war. Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, gave that generation a doctrine, and the doctrine was this: that the front line against an unjust aggressor is not merely a military position, it is a mihrab, a place of worship. That to hold the seam against the one who comes to devour your people is ibadah, an act of devotion. That the frontier of Du'a Ahl al-Thughur, or the supplication of the people of the frontiers, is not a metaphor, but a place that you can stand with mud on your boots, a place that you can stand on with mud on your boots and worship God by refusing to let the aggressor pass. The Basiji, the volunteer, did not go to the front for the nation alone, in the way, for example, a conscript goes. He went the way a man goes to a mosque or into his prayer room or onto his prayer mat. The trench was a prayer niche. Murabata, the abstraction of the 12th night, had become a national reality and a personal devotion all at once. And here's the thing that those young men left behind, the thing I most want to put into your hands tonight. They all wrote wills. Before they went out, many of them, almost all of them you could say, they sat down and they wrote what we call a wasiyatnameh, a final will and testament, a letter to be opened only if they did not come back. And these have been published since in their thousands, tens of thousands, gathered into volumes, kept in foundations, read aloud over loudspeakers. And when you read them, something truly quite startling happens. They all read like extensions of the very supplication we studied on the 12th night. They read like the Sahifa of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, written in the plain hand of a 20-year-old. The layperson's Sahifa, if you like. Witness written down before it died. Let me give you one plainly. His name was Muhammad Reza Samadzadeh. He was born in Zahedan in 1961, and he was martyred at Somar in November of 1981, around the age of 20. His will opens, and listen to where a 20-year-old reaches for his opening. In the dark, before a battle he may not survive. It opens on the verse of the second night of this series. You can find the references in the write-up. He starts, and he says, "Those who are killed in the way of God never die." He is reached untaught for the same truth that Salama's bottle of red earth carried across this whole series. That the witness lives on beside his Lord. And then he turns to his mother and his father and he asks them, and this is the part that will undo you. He asks them not to receive his death with grief, not to be frightened of his body, and if it is convenient, to bury him quietly in Zahedan, the town of his birth. A boy of 20, composing his mother's consolation well in advance, so that her sorrow would have somewhere soft to land. That is not the letter of a soldier. That is the letter of a worshipper and a lover. That is du'a ahl al-thughur, or the supplication of the people of the frontiers, in a young man's own handwriting. And then there is the one I want to carry forward into the rest of the night, because it ties this frontier straight back to the standard bearer of Karbala we stood behind on the 7th night. His name was Sayyid Ali Hashimi. He commanded a division. He was martyred on the Majnoon Islands in June of 1988. And hold on to this. His body was not found for 22 years. He came home in 2010. And in his will, he prays a prayer so saturated in Karbala that you can taste the dust of it. He asked God for 3 things, and he asked for them by the names of the men of the field. Reference again is in the write-up. And he says, O God, grant that I be martyred in a waterless desert, that I may be thirsty like my master Imam Husayn. O God, I ask that at the moment of my martyrdom, my head be severed from my body, so that I will not be ashamed before the master of martyrs. O God, I ask that at the moment of my martyrdom, both my hands be cut off my body, so that I will not be ashamed before the standard bearer of Islam, Abul Fadl Abbas. Again, the references are all in the write-up. I strongly recommend people review them. Both my hands, so that I will not be shamed before Abbas, the standard bearer of the 7th night, the man whose 2 hands were taken at the Euphrates. And here is a commander in the 1980s asking God to let him lose his hands in the same way, so that when he meets Abbas, he will not have to look down at his 2 whole arms and feel the shame of having kept what Abbas gave away. And then he asks, was Ali al-Akbar without purpose? Was Abul Fadl Abbas without purpose? Can a soldier of Ruhullah be without purpose? And he asks that a picture of Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, be placed on his grave larger than his own, hoping that he counts me amongst his soldiers. And it's like I said, the references in the write-up. The chain of witness is not an idea to this man. It is the address that he is writing to. He is mailing his death to Karbala. That is the root, and it is the first thing I needed you to see this evening. The frontier holder of the 12th night is no longer an abstraction in a prayer. Here is a whole generation that held the seam against the oppressor, understood that holding as worship, and wrote its witness down before it died, and wrote it in the vocabulary of Imam Husayn and Abul Fadl Abbas, in the vocabulary of Karbala and Ashura. The chain did not stop at Karbala. It came down to a boy from Zahedan and a commander on the Majnoon Islands, and they knew it, and they signed their names against it. And we will be honest about what came after. Now, because honesty is the whole method of this series, and because I will not sell you anything tonight, I have to say the harder half of this, the half a propagandist would leave out. That witness was afterwards institutionalized. The wills became foundations. The faces became murals on the side of buildings. The sacrifice became a curriculum, a commemoration, a season. And there is a real and beautiful strength in that. A society that remembers its martyrs, that forms its young around the memory of sacrifice rather than around the memory of consumption, is doing something most of the modern world has completely forgotten how to do. We're not going to pretend otherwise. But there is an honest critique that has been made from within, and we made its theology ourselves on the 8th night. The danger that the witness becomes a mere aesthetic, a slogan on a banner, a career for the well-connected, a beautiful image emptied of the substance that made it beautiful. The 8th night warned us against this exactly, the counterfeit that keeps the form of the witness and loses the heart of it. And that is why we name both of them. The remembering is good. The hollowing out is the danger. And the very fact that we can say both out loud on the same night is the discipline that earns us the right to everything else we're going to say, God willing. We are not selling anything tonight. We are weighing. A whole generation held a frontier and they wrote down why. That is not history either. The same chain that produced Samadzadeh and Sayyid Hashemi kept producing links, and some of those links you watched die. So let us follow it down, out of the trenches of the 1980s and into the chain of our own adult lifetime. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move on to the next point, which is the branches, the chain of our own lifetime.
اللهم صل على محمد
So on the 13th night, we mapped the grades of witness: the battlefield, the hereafter, the scholar, the worker, and the child. And tonight I'm going to take that map and lay it over the last 40 odd years. And you're going to watch the grades of witness walk amongst us. I'm going to name names. Not many. This is not a roll call for its own sake. Every name here is a link. And I want you to feel the chain take the strain as we hang each one upon it. And there is a discipline I'm asking of myself as we go. As we name them at a single level weight. No name lifted higher in the voice than the next. No melody creeping into the litany, because the list of martyrs is not a song. It is a chain, and a chain is strongest when every link is forged the same gauge. So we start in Lebanon. On a seam of the world the empire has tried to cauterize for more than half a century, and that has not stopped bearing witness. Begin with Imam Musa al-Sadr, who vanished. He flew to Libya in 1978, and he never came back. He was disappeared, erased, made to not exist by a regime that found his voice inconvenient. And here is a strange grade of witness for you, one the 13th night's map can hold: a martyrdom in absence. A man whose very erasure testifies, whose empty place at the table has shouted for nearly 50 years, louder than his presence ever could. The empire thought to disappear a man is to silence him. It learned with Imam Musa al-Sadr that an absence can be a witness too. Then Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Fadlallah, the scholar whose lectures and rulings formed a generation, and whom they tried to kill with a car bomb that murdered 80 people in Beirut. And they missed him. The scholar witness who lived under the shadow of the bomb and went on teaching. Then Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, 16th of February 1992. An Israeli helicopter tracked his motorcade home from a commemoration and fired. And it did not only kill him. It killed his wife, Sayyid al-Siham, and it killed his small son, Sayyid Husayn, a child of 5. The household struck together. I'm going to let that resonance stand without forcing it. You can hear, on the road home from a commemoration of Karbala, the rhyme of a household taken together. I do not need a hammer. I do not need to hammer it into the equation. I only need you to notice that the man who led the Islamic resistance was martyred with his wife and child beside him on the road home in our own time, and that the tradition of the household that is struck together did not end at the Euphrates. Then Hajj Imad Mughniye, Damascus, February of 2008. And here a thread from the 11th night pays off in a single line. We spoke on the 11th night of the witness who effaces himself, who lives a quarter of a century and more in the shadows so that the work can go on, whose own name is a kind of fast that he keeps. That was Hajj Imad, 25 years a ghost in the service of the line, until a bomb in his car headrest found him. The man who gave up his own visibility as a form of worship. And then the 27th of September 2024, said Hassan Nasrallah. And I don't have to tell you who he was or read it to you from a chronicle, because we all watched it happen. Many of us in this room learned of his martyrdom the way we learn of the death in our own family nowadays, from the glass of our phone in our hand in real time, the bunker-busting bombs going through the earth of Dahia on a live feed. This is what I meant at the top of the night. The chain did not stay in the books. We watched a link of it severed on our phones on a Friday, and we wept into the same glass that showed it to us. That is a witness of our own lifetime, not a chronicle, but a memory. Then we cross into Iraq. Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim. He returned from a lifetime of exile into a free Najaf and was murdered there at the door of the shrine of the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, by a car bomb in August of 2003, along with scores of worshippers leaving the Friday prayer. The scholar martyred on the threshold of the very shrine he had spent his life longing to return to. And then the defenders of the shrines, the young men of the popular mobilization, or Hashd al-Sha'bi, who, when the Takfiri flood of ISIS or Daesh came down on Iraq to erase the shrines of the Imams and to enslave the Izadis and slaughter the Christians and Shia alike, put their bodies between the Takfiris and the people and the domes. These are the battlefield martyrs of the 13th night's first door, the Shaheed of the front line, produced in their thousands in our own decade on our own watch. And at the head of them, Haj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy commander of that mobilization. I want to read you something from his last will and testament because it's going to come back at the very heart of this night when we reach the cry in the street. And I want it already in your ear. He says, and Marg who he lists among the people he understands himself to be serving. The reference, of course, is in the write-up. He writes, our goal is to gain the pleasure of God Almighty and to serve the people, Sunni, Shia, Christian and Izadis. We are not aggressors. Rather, we fight for reform and for the elimination of terrorism in this region. Christians and Izadis, sometimes they're known as Yazidis, but the actual title is Izadi. The man the empire's newspapers filed under Iranian-backed militia commander names the Christian and the Izadi among the people that he's dying to protect. Keep that sentence, we will need it. Haj Abu Mahdi was martyred on the 3rd of January 2020, and to say how, we have to cross the last border into Iran and arrive at the link that reframes this entire series. On that same night, the 3rd of January 2020, at Baghdad airport, an American drone flown from a base in the Nevada desert fired missiles into a convoy and killed Haj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and beside him Haj Qasim Soleimani. We have walked the road of Haj Qasim across 4 nights of this series, his talab, his ishq, his ma'rifat and his shahada. We closed the 4 stages of his path on the 9th night, and I will not re-walk them now. Tonight, he simply takes his place in the chain, the commander who held the seam against the Takfiri flood across 3 countries actually, named by an empire as a terrorist and killed by it in the open by remote control on a 3rd country's soil. A link. Hang him on the chain at the same level weight as the rest, and we move on, because the chain has one more link in our own lifetime, and it is the one that makes a believer have to sit down. Because just a few months ago, on the 28th of February 2026, the chain reached the Wali al-Amr himself. Imam Sayyid Ali Husseini al-Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, the guardian of the affairs of the Muslims, was struck down in his own house in Tehran by a fire sent from far away, and he was martyred. The guardian of the line, the man who for 36 years carried the trust and never once set it down. Now I have to handle this with a great deal of care, and I want to tell it to you exactly how I'm going to handle it, because the temptation is to stop the whole series here and build a second series inside it. I'm not going to do that. His life, his station, the meaning of Wilayat al-Faqih, the whole theology of the guardianship he carried, that has its own home. It is coming, God willing, in the forthcoming Lantern of the Past sub-series on Wilayat al-Faqih. And it deserves the room. Tonight, he does one thing, and one thing only. He stands in the chain. He is the link of our own lifetime that proves the chain is not a museum. So let me give you only 2 things that make him the link, and then let him take his place. The first is what he said near the end. On the 7th night and the 10th night of this series, we heard Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, give his first refusal. The night they came to Walid ibn Utbah's house in Medina and demanded his allegiance to Yazid, and he answered, and the reference is all in the write-up, he said, and one like me does not ever give allegiance to one like Yazid. 11 days before he was martyred on the 17th of February 2026, Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, stood up and said that exact sentence again in his own words, into our own time. And he said, again, the references in the write-up, the Iranian nation knows its Islamic and Shia lessons well. It knows what it must do. Imam Husayn, peace be upon him, said, one like me does not give allegiance to one like Yazid. He restated Imam Husayn's first refusal. And notice, with the care that the 13th night has taught us, that he did not say, I will not give allegiance. He said the nation will not. A people like ours will not give allegiance to a corrupt lords like the ones now in power in the empire. He spoke of the system, never of himself. And 11 days later, they killed him. The first refusal of Karbala, restated by the guardian of the line in our own decade, and the price paid the same week in full. This is not a man quoting Imam Husayn. That is the chain holding. And the second thing is the one I cannot get past, and I don't think you will either. On the day he was martyred, his official account posted a message to the world. And the message was not a threat, and it was not a boast. It was a verse of Qur'an. Which verse? It was Qur'an, Surah al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 23. And we went through this in the 3 parts of the Unbroken series. In Qur'an, Allah says, God says, among the believers are men who have been true to their covenant with God. Among them is he who has fulfilled his pledge, and among them is he who still waits, and they have not changed in the least. I want you to feel the whole series gather behind that verse. On the second night, we stood at the covenant of al-Ahzab, am I not your Lord? The oldest promise the human soul ever made in Surah Al-A'raf. Surah Al-A'raf, the chapter of the height, 7th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 172. On the third night and the fourth night, we watched the men of the house keep that covenant. And here, on the day of his death, the guardian of the line reaches for the verse that says the covenant was kept. Sadaqu ma ahadallahu alayh. They were true to what they promised God. And he files himself under its first clause. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ. The one who fulfilled his pledge, the one who has paid it to the death. He told us in his last public word which clause of that verse he had come to. He had come to the end of the covenant of the second night, and he had kept it. The promise of al-Ahzab, sealed in our own lifetime by a man who would not change in the least. That is the link. And now I let him take his place, and I tell you plainly that the trust did not fall when he did. It passed within a mere days to his son, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba al-Husayni Khamenei. May God protect him. And the full telling of what that trust is waits for its own night. Tonight it is enough that we have seen the chain reach all the way to the Wali Amr. And hold. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the killing of a people's future.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
But the empire that severed those links did not only kill commanders and guardians and leaders. It has been killing something quieter and in some ways far more revealing for at least 15 years. And I planted only the principle of it on the 11th night, and tonight I have to name it. On the 11th night, I asked you a question and I left it hanging. What is the excuse for killing a professor of physics, a cancer researcher, a scholar of artificial intelligence? The killing of knowledge itself by stealth to keep a people subordinate. Tonight, I give the question a face, and I'm going to lead with the cleanest, most human case in the whole record. Because precision is mercy here, and because I want the point to be one no honest person can even attempt to knock down. His name was Dariush Razainejad. He was a young researcher, an engineer. He was 35 years old. In July of 2011, gunmen on a motorcycle shot him 5 times outside his home in Tehran while he was in his car with his wife wounded beside him and their little daughter in the car who had just been collected from kindergarten. A child picked up from kindergarten in the back of the car while her father was shot to death in front of her. And that daughter, Armita, said one sentence afterwards in English that I want to be the whole of the human case. She said, reference again in the write-up, he was a scientist who had nothing to do with violence. That is one. The iconic one is Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, killed in November of 2020 on a road outside Tehran by a remote-controlled, satellite-linked, computer-aimed machine gun. A man shot dead by a machine with no hands on it. His wife 25 centimeters away and untouched, because the machine was that precise about which life it was ending. And it is not two cases, it is a pattern that runs from 2010 to 2025 and beyond. Ali Muhammadi, Shahriyari, Ahmadi Roshan, and on through the strikes of June 2025 and through the strikes post-February 2026. More than a decade and a half of scientists killed in their cars, on their roads, beside their families, or exploded. Now hear the discipline of how I am arguing this, because it matters. I'm not standing here to adjudicate the exact job description of any one of these men. Some of them are tied, by Iran's own account, to programs the empire feared. Rationally or irrationally is another discussion, and I'm not going to pretend to weigh each man's life. The attribution of these killings to a foreign intelligence service by stealth is what is reported. I name it as it is reported, and I don't need to do more than that. Because my argument is not about any one man's role. My argument is about the method and about the principle. The method is the assassination of knowledge by stealth, the murder of a non-combatant, a teacher, a researcher, in front of his children, not for anything he did on a battlefield, but for what he knew and for what he might teach a people to know. And here is the principle, the reductio I left you with on the 11th night, and it stands on its own, clean of any one man's file. What conceivable excuse is there for killing a cancer researcher, a scholar of artificial intelligence, a professor at a university? To kill a people's scientists is to kill its future, its capacity to learn, to heal, to build, to climb up out of the subordination the empire has assigned to it. It is a crime of the very first order. And we see it happening in Gaza, not just with scientists, but we see educational establishments completely destroyed in Gaza by the same empire. And the collective West, and most of the world with it, do not and did not condemn this. Rather, they looked away. So do this one honest thing. Imagine for a single moment the scientists of a Western nation assassinated in their cars on the school run by a foreign machine, one after another, for at least 15 years. Imagine the reaction. Now measure that imagined reaction against the actual silence. The silence is the double standard exposed, the mask taken off, the empire and the media that launders for it. And here is the hinge that takes us out the chain of martyrs and into the hardest and most important movement of the night. Why? Why would a throne murder the future of a people it claims to have no quarrel with? Why kill the teacher, the researcher, the child's father on the school run? There is a word for the answer, and I want you to hold it the way we held the hinge on the floor. Interest, capital, resources, the lion's share. The throne kills the future of a people to keep that people from rising into a position where it might one day lay claim to its own share. But hold the word interest the way the rest of the night will teach you to hold it, as a symptom, never the sickness itself. The hunger for the lion's share is only the appetite. Arrogance is the body it feeds. The will to raise yourself by holding another down. And the capital is merely what that arrogance reaches for. The throne does not devour because it is hungry. It is hungry, or it devours, because it is proud. Hold that, because it opens the next door, and behind the next door is the whole machinery of our age. But before we open that door, there is one more branch of the chain, and it is the one that is bleeding right now, tonight, while we sit here, and it is the emotional center of gravity of this whole night, so I'm not going to rush past it. From October of 2023 to this very hour, a genocide. I'm going to give you only the figures the most careful international monitors will stand behind, because I will not inflate what is already unbearable. As of late March of 2026, the United Nations Humanitarian Office counts more than 72,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza and more than 170,000 wounded. Nearly 2 million people, almost the entire population, driven from their homes. And the children, a whole generation of children in Gaza, a generation of witnesses in the exact sense this series has spent 14 nights building. And the thing that makes this different from every atrocity in the long human record of atrocity is the glass. It was broadcast into our hands. We did not read about it in a book 40 or 50 years later. We watched it live on the phones in our pockets, the most documented slaughter in the history of the species, witnessed in real time by the largest audience that has ever witnessed anything and not stopped. And among the witnesses was a witness who died witnessing. And for a series called Shahada, or Witness, there is no purer link in the whole chain. His name was Anas al-Sharif. He was 28, a journalist born in the Jabalia refugee camp. He reported from Gaza for the world to see, until, in August of 2025, an Israeli strike on the tent of journalists killed him. And he had his will written in advance, to be released should he be killed. And listen to what a man whose entire life was bearing witness asks of God in his last words. The reference is in the write-up. He writes, "I never stop telling the truth as it is, without falsification or distortion, so that God may bear witness over those who stayed silent." So that God may bear witness over those who stayed silent. He died holding up the witness, and with his last breath, he handed the question to us, who stayed silent. And he was not the only one to hand it on. The children handed it on too. A child of Gaza named Muhammad Abdul Qadir Husayn wrote his own will, and in it he said, "I am a trust, do not humiliate us." And he begged the peoples of the world, he listed them nation by nation, do not forget Gaza. Again, references are all in the write-up. A child entrusting the earth with his own people, because the thrones would not. So here is the question this beat lays on every English-speaking believer in the West. The question we cannot honestly walk around. What does it do to a soul? What does it require of a soul for the rest of its life to have watched tens of thousands of witnesses produced in a single generation, broadcast into the palm of his or her own hand, and to have been told by every throne and every screen around it to look away and call it something else? Anas al-Sharif asked God to witness against the ones who stayed silent. We do not get to be the ones who stayed silent. And the refusal to stay silent is exactly the cry we have been circling all night. The cry that the hinge in the floor has been waiting for. We have named the throne's victims. Now we have to name the throne. Please give me a loud salawat. We move on to the next section, which is titled Down with the Throne, Marg Amrika, Marg Esra'il.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Now we come to it, to the cry, to the single most weaponized and most misunderstood sentence our community ever says out loud. The sentence that gets us called fanatics, that gets quoted back at us with the camera lingering on the angriest face in the crowd, that has, more than almost anything else, been used to convince the watching world that we are a people who wish death on people. I'm going to spend the heart of this night on it, and I'm going to give it a clean name and a clean theology because it has earned both, and because you cannot be against a thing until you have shown plainly and patiently exactly what that thing is. And I'm going to insist on one posture the whole way through. The posture of the believer at his best, tabyin, or clarification, not apologetics. I'm not going to sit here wringing my hands and whispering, well, we don't really mean it. We mean it. The cry is right. The people who raise it are right. The thrones it is aimed at are what it says they are. What I'm going to do is the harder thing. Show you precisely what we mean. So precisely that the fear drops out of it and only the truth is left standing. We will do it in this order. First, the Constitution. What the believer is even permitted to be against. Then the word. What down with actually means. Marg or al-Maut. What does it actually mean? Then the method. How a fair person judges a nation at all. Then the evidence. The throne worked as a live case. And then the landing. Who the cry is really for and how it ends. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the first point, which is the Constitution, what Islam is actually against. You cannot say down with anything until you've established what a believer is permitted to oppose. And the Constitution is not my opinion. It is the Qur'an and it is decisive. Let's start at the baseline. What did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, come as? In Qur'an, Surah Anbiya, the chapter of the Prophets, 21st chapter of the Qur'an, verse 107, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and we did not send you except as a mercy to all the worlds. Not as a mercy to the Arabs, not as a mercy to this tribe or one creed. Not as a mercy to one tribe or one creed, rather. To all the worlds, to all of humanity, believer and unbeliever, near and far. The baseline of the whole religion is mercy, not conquest. Now let's build on that baseline, because the next thing the Constitution does is tell you the one thing the believer is licensed to take up arms against, and it is not what you have been told it is. Hear the very first verse of permission to fight ever revealed. We stood on this exact verse on the 7th night as our preamble. The Constitution was laid down 7 nights ago, and tonight it comes back to do its work. In Qur'an, Surah Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage, 22nd chapter of the Qur'an, verses 39 to 40, God tells us, permission to fight has been given to those who are fought against because they have been wronged. And indeed God is fully able to give them victory. Those who have been driven from their homes without right, only for saying our Lord is God. Watch the grammar, because the whole Constitution is in one little particle. Permission is given. Why? بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا, because they were wronged. And our deepest commentator nails the particle to the floor. Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan says the word ba here, the because, is the ba of causation. The permission is given because they have been oppressed. And the oppression is then defined in the very next breath as being expelled from their homes. Allama Tabatabai writes, you can find the reference in the write-up. He says, the ba in because they were wronged, بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا, is for causation. And it is the justification of the permission to fight. That is, they were given permission to fight because they were wronged. And as for what the wrong is, its interpretation is his saying, those who have been expelled from their homes without right, and so on. So the very first license to fight in the history of this religion is a license against dhulm, against injustice, against expulsion, against the theft of a home. And it is not anywhere in the verse a license against kufr, against disbelief, against the mere fact that someone holds a different creed. The Constitution opens against injustice, not against belief or disbelief. Mark that. And if you doubt that the earliest fighting of Islam was actually about injustice and not about disbelief, look at what the Qur'an says the believers of Mecca were actually fighting over. The pagan aristocracy in Quraysh has seized the homes and the property of the Muslims left behind when they were driven out to Medina, and were trading on the proceeds. The Qur'an names it. In Qur'an, Surah Al-Hashr, the chapter of the exile, 59th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 8, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for the poor emigrants who were expelled from their homes and their properties. expelled from their homes and their properties. The reckoning at Badr and after was a reckoning with stolen wealth and aggression and expulsion, not a punishment handed down to a people for declining to believe. Correct the slander at its root. It was never they fought because the others would not believe. It was they fought because they had been robbed and oppressed and driven out. And then the Qur'an draws the line so plainly that no honest listener or reader or viewer can blur it. The clearest verse of all. Qur'an, Surah Mumtahana, the chapter of the examined woman, 60th chapter of the Qur'an, verses 8 through 9. God says, God does not forbid you regarding those who did not fight you over religion and did not drive you from your homes, that you be kind and just to them. Indeed, God loves the just. God only forbids you regarding those who fought you over religion and drove you from your homes and supported your expulsion, that you take them as allies. There it is, black and white. The Qur'an draws the line at aggression and expulsion, at fighting you and driving you out. And it explicitly draws the line not at religious difference. The one who differs in you in creed, but does not fight you and does not expel you, be kind to them, be just to them. God loves the just. And Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan draws that line in his own hand and tells you exactly who the verse means and what the kindness and the justice are. You can find the reference in the write-up. Allama says, his saying, God does not forbid you regarding those who did not fight you over religion and did not drive you from your homes, that you be kind to them and deal justly with them, in this verse and the one that follows is a clarification of the prohibition given at the opening of the chapter. And what is meant by those who did not fight the believers over religion and did not drive them out is those other than the people of Mecca, among them the idolaters, who did not fight them and did not expel them from their homes. The people bound by treaty, and al-birr is kindness and goodness, and al-iqsāṭ is dealing with justice. And his saying, indeed God loves the just, is the justification for God does not forbid you. You can find the reference in the write-up. The non-combatant who merely differs in religion, the one bound to you by treaty, the one who never raised a hand against you, is owed by the command of God who loves the just, not suspicion and not hostility, but rather kindness and just dealing. The Constitution could not be clearer. The line is drawn at injustice and never at belief. And now the keystone, the verse that you've probably heard hundreds or thousands of times and perhaps never heard all the way down. Qur'an, Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Qur'an, verse 256. There is no compulsion in religion. The right course has become clear from error. We usually hear that as a rule. You must not force yourself to believe. It is that, but Allama Tabatabai shows us it is something deeper than a rule. It is a statement of how reality is actually built. The reference is in the write-up. Allama writes, belief follows reason and understanding, and nothing but reason and understanding can create it. You may force someone to do a certain physical action against his will, but he cannot be forced to believe against his will. Do you hear that? It is not only that you may not force belief, it is that you cannot force belief. Belief is a thing of the heart, and the heart answers to reason, to understanding, to free recognition, and to nothing else. You can put a sword to a man's throat, and you can make his tongue move. You cannot put a sword to his heart and make it recognize. God says the same of his own prophet, to his own prophet, in Surah Yunus, the chapter of Jonah, 10th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 99. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and had your Lord willed, everyone on earth would have believed, all of them together. So will you compel people until they become believers? God himself, who could have made every soul believe with a single word of his will, chose not to, because a faith that is forced is not the faith that he wants. And Allama Tabatabai once more on this very verse says the obvious and devastating thing in his own hand. References, as always, are in the write-up. He says, his saying, and had your Lord willed, all those on earth would have believed together. That is, but he did not will it, so they did not all believe, nor will they. The willing of that belongs to God, glory be to him, and he did not will it. So it is not fitting for you to hope for it, nor to exert yourself for it, for you have no power to coerce them and force them into belief. And the belief we want from them is that which comes by good free choice, what we call husn al-ikhtiyar, not that which comes by compulsion and force. The belief God wants is the belief that comes by husn al-ikhtiyar, good free choice. It is not a belief that he will accept at all. Now stay with me, because here's the keystone the whole movement is built upon. And it is the place where the Constitution turns from a rule into a reason. Forced belief is not merely forbidden. It cannot succeed. A belief that is coerced is by its own nature temporary and untrue. The tongue that says one thing while the heart says another. And our tradition has a word for exactly that condition. The gap between the tongue and the heart. Nifaq. Hypocrisy. Listen to how the Imams define faith itself and watch what it does to the very idea of a forced convert. References in the write-up. Faith is recognition by the heart, profession by the tongue, and action by the limbs. Recognition by the heart first, and the profession of the tongue rests entirely upon it. So when a tyrant puts a sword to a man and forces the tongue to say the words, the tongue moves, but the heart was never given the chance to recognize. So what has the tyrant produced? Not a believer, not a man whose tongue and heart, but a man whose tongue and heart are at war, a munafiq, a hypocrite, manufactured by the sword. He has not built faith, rather he has built the exact opposite. The jurists put this in the most precise of legal terms. The testimony of faith, the Shahada, is an iqrar, a binding declaration. And a declaration made under coercion, under what we call ikrah, is batil. It is legally void, because coercion strips away the intention and the consent that make a declaration real. Force the words and you have not made a Muslim, you have made a man perjure himself before God. Ayatollah said, Abul Qasim al-Khoi, may God rest his pure soul, stated the principle at its root against those who imagine the verse of no compulsion has been cancelled by some later verse of war. And the reference for this is in the write-up. Religion, said al-Khoi says, religion by its very nature refuses to be coerced. By its very nature refuses. And this is the piece to lay to rest for good, the slander that Islam was spread by the sword. The wars of the Prophet and the Imams, and here is the Marja's articulation of the whole thing from Imam al-Khomeini, were never fought to force the religion into people's hearts. They were fought to break the Taghut systems, the structures of tyranny that stood between the people and the message, that kept the truth from even reaching the ears of those that the tyrant ruled. Imam Khomeini writes in his great work of jurisprudence, and you can find the reference in the write-up, he writes, the aim was the removal of sedition and the dismantling of the tyrant systems, not the compulsion of people into the religion. For faith is a matter of the heart, and it is not attained by force and the sword. Hold what that did. The sword of Islam, says the founder of the Islamic Revolution and Republic, was never aimed at a person's belief. It was aimed at the Taghut system, the tyrant structure that stood between the people and the freedom to choose. And that is the bridge, the exact bridge into the cry that we're walking toward. The sword and the cry are against the Taghut system, never against a person's belief and never against a person's life. Remember that. We will stand on it in a few moments. And here is a principle of fiqh that seals it. And it is one we have already met this very series. We are not permitted to help a soul into sin. In Qur'an, Surah Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 2, God says, cooperate in piety and God-wariness, but do not cooperate in sin and aggression, and be weary of God. Indeed, God is severe in retribution. Do not cooperate in sin and aggression. This is why the jurists say you do not even ask the question of a man you know will lie to you, except where a higher duty demands it. Because to corner a soul into a lie is to assist him into the sin. Now apply it to forced belief. To force a man to profess a faith his heart does not hold is to help him to a lie. To drag a soul into nifaq, into hypocrisy. It is the precise opposite of religion. The one who forces conversion thinking he is saving a soul, the Qur'an says he is destroying one by manufacturing a hypocrite where God wanted a free believer. And our master, the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, set the dignity of that free choosing at the center of what the human being even is. You can find the reference in the write-up, but Imam Ali says, and do not be the slave of another, for God has made you free. God has made you free. Freedom is not, contrary to what we get told in the media, a Western invention. The empire is bringing to us at the point of a missile. It is the dignity God stitched into the very human soul, the dignity that makes belief possible in the first place. And history proves the whole argument again and again and again, with the grim consistency. Forced belief never holds. Look at what the great coercers actually built, because every one of them proves the rule by breaking against it. Consider, the Inquisition tortured Spain into a uniformity of creed and produced a nation of secret unbelievers and terrified conformists. The Soviet Empire all but outlawed religion across a sixth of the earth for the better part of a century. And St. Basil's still stood on the square. And the moment the boot lifted, the faith came back up out of the ground like grass through concrete. Because belief in God sits at the core of a people and cannot be coerced out, and it cannot be coerced in. That is the wall the throne keeps colliding with. It can break a body, but it cannot make a heart. Which is exactly why the believer's sword, and in a moment the believer's cry, was never aimed at what a person believes. It is aimed at one thing and one thing alone. The structure that stands between people and the freedom to choose at all. Keep that with you. We're about to need it in the street. And so we must lift away gently but firmly a thing some sincere and zealous people have done. Forced a conversion, dragged the tongue to the Shahada on the strength of misread narration, imagining they were handing a man and themselves a guaranteed place in paradise. No one is guaranteed paradise. That has been a theme of this whole series from the third night to the 13th. What matters is not a creed pronounced at sword point. What matters is the state a person dies in. A lifetime of apparent sanctity can be undone by a final act, and a lifetime of error can be redeemed by a final turning. You cannot hand a man heaven by handing him a sentence his heart does not hold. Please give me a salawat and we move to the real fault line, the arrogant and the downtrodden.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So if the line is not between Muslim and non-Muslim, so where is it? The Qur'an draws the real front line of all of human history, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It runs not between East and West, not between creed and creed, but between the arrogant, what we call al-mustakbirun, and the ones who exalt themselves and devour others, and the downtrodden, the al-mustad'afun, the ones who the arrogant grinds down. Listen to how God describes his own program in history. In Qur'an, Surah Qasas, the chapter of the stories, the narrations, 28th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 5, God says, And we desired to show favor to those who were oppressed in the land, and to make them leaders, and to make them the inheritors. That is the axis the whole series has been tracing without always naming it. From Abel and Cain on the first night, to Pharaoh and the children of Israel, to Imam Husayn and Yazid. The arrogant work against populations. They lie, they manipulate, they plant half-truths, and mark this because this is the diagnostic. They amplify a people's wounds instead of healing them, because the wound is the arrogant one's profit. And tonight, for the first time in this series, we name the axis in the present tense. And we name the cry that disavows the arrogant for what it is. Now, and only now, with the Constitution clear, we can say what the cry in the street actually means. So the word, what does down with mean? The word, marg, al-maut li. Let me start by doing the honest thing, the thing we always do with a frightening word. Let me not hide it. In Persian, Farsi, marg means death and bar means upon. In Arabic, al-maut means death, li means upon. Literally, and I will say it plainly, I will not pretend the word is something it is not. Marg bar or al-maut li translates word for word as death too. And in the same breath, before anyone can lift those words away from the rest of the sentence, I will tell you what every speaker of the language already knows, and what no clip of an angry crowd will ever show you. The words say death too, and the meaning was never about death at all. Say it out loud, do not flinch from it, just as we did with laʿan. Because we have done exactly this before in this very series and within this group, and it is the precedent that unlocks everything. Long ago, when we did our first Muharram, we refused the English word curse for the Arabic laʿan. The word curse is commonly used as a translation for the word laʿan. We refused it because curse in English drags in malice and witchcraft and the wishing of evil onto a person. And laʿan never meant any of that. Laʿan is a supplication, and that the mercy of God be made distant from the oppressor. So we put the clumsy, frightening English word down, and we picked up the accurate sentence. Yes, it's longer, it's not one word, but that doesn't matter. May the mercy of God be distant from such and such. The same referent, but a much cleaner understanding. The fear drained out, the irrational fear drained out, and the truth stayed. The exact same move applies to both marg bar and al-maut li. Death too makes the English hear, or the English speaking ear hear, a wish upon bodies, a desire that human beings drop dead. The idiom never meant that. Across the languages of the resistance, whose first language, remember, is not English, marg bar or al-maut li does the work that the English down with the king does, that the French Abbas does, that in plain Arabic, yasquṭ, you heard it in the Arab Spring, does. It is the repudiation of a throne, a system, a regime. Down with it, may it fall, let this be brought low. It is what a crowd shouts at a tyrant statue as the rope goes around his neck. Down with the king, down with the throne. And hear me, down with is not the soft translation. Rather, it is the accurate one, and therefore it is the stronger one. And it is stronger because it aims the repudiation exactly where it belongs, at the system of arrogance. And it closes the door on the fear word, death, which was never the point. We are not a people who wish death. We do not wish death or the fire on a single soul that God has made. This is why we even do this, to clarify, because we want every soul to not to go in the fire and not to have a bad death. We disavow the system that stands in the way. We disavow the tyrant who doesn't want the people to learn. And this is nothing other than the Qur'an's own barā'a, theological disavowal of oppression, as opposed to bughd, the hatred of persons and people, which our religion forbids upon us. Barā'a from the throne, never bughd of a people. And now I come back and stand on the hinge I set in the floor right at the start of the night. Can you feel it under your feet? Marbar Amrika, al-Mawt Amrika, Marbar Esra'il, al-Mawt Esra'il, down with the throne of America, down with the throne of the Zionist regime, is the tabarra of Ziyarat Ashura spoken aloud in the streets. It is the very thing your tongue has done every Thursday for 1400 years. فَلَعْنَ اللَّهُ أُمَّةً أَسَّسَتْ أَسَاسَ الظُّلْمِ. May the mercy of God be distant from the people who laid the foundation of oppression. Not the bystander, not the nation, not the people. The foundation of oppression, the throne, the system, the taghut structure that Imam Khomeini said the very sword of Islam was aimed at. A believer who cries marbar or al-Mawtli in the square and the believer who whispers the laʿan of Ziyarat Ashura in the dark are doing the same thing in two different languages. Disavowing the throne, standing with the wronged. So let me state the rule that governs the whole cry, the rule we have been calling lock number 8 all series long. The regime is the disease. The named ruler is but a symptom. Name a ruler, name any of them, in London, in Washington, in Tel Aviv, or anywhere else, and the system simply installs another. The throne does not depend on the man. The man depends on the throne. So we say down with the throne, never down with a man, and never ever down with the people. The cry is against the structure of arrogance. It was and is never against a human being's life, and it was never against a human being's belief. Give me a salawat, we go on to the method, the believer as a fair arbiter. But how does a believer even judge a nation? How do we know which throne the disavowal belongs to, and which accusation against the country is true, and which is a manufactured lie? Here I have to teach you not from a book, but from the way I have been taught to do the most ordinary and the most delicate work of religious life, arbitration. Before you judge a nation, let us learn how we are taught to judge, for example, a marriage. When a lady comes to me asking for help against her husband, I am not permitted to act on the surface of it, on the tears in front of me, on the version that I am handed. If I did, I would do a terrible damage and I would call it justice. So I am taught to do this. I hear both sides, each one alone, where neither can perform for the other. I listen to the children where there are children, because the children as a rule do not lie. They have a certain bias and I have to take that into account. But generally the children have no case to win. They only want to have a home that is whole. I hear the in-laws and I quietly discount for their bias because I know which way each of them leans before they even open their mouths. And there is one more thing that I'm taught to do, and it is the most important. I silence the lobby. And there is almost always a lobby, a sister, a friend, a relative who keeps whispering in the wronged party's ear, bad-mouthing the other side, pouring fuel on a fire that might otherwise be put out, because her or his stake is in the conflict continuing. Keep that in mind. He or she is not a fair party. He or she is generally clouding the truth. And I cannot reach the truth until I have gently set her aside for the duration of the judgment. Only then, with both sides heard, the children believed, the bias discounted, the lobby silenced, the crocodile tears refused, the truth seen beneath the veneer. Only then can a fair judgment be made. And the aim of the whole exercise, hear this, because it governs everything. The aim is always remedy, never the manufacture of hatred, never the encouraging of divorce. In such situations, people like myself are there to heal a home, not to win a war. Now, take that exact method and scale it up to the size of a nation. Geopolitics has more moving parts. It does not have a different method. When a people is said from the outside by a throne with cameras to be oppressed by its own government and crying out for rescue, the believer does not simply go nuts and demonize the country. That helps no one. Worse, it deepens the very oppression it claims to oppose, because it hands the lobby exactly the picture the lobby wanted to paint. The believer does what the arbiter does. He gathers the data points. Is the country at war? Is it under siege? Is it under sanctions? Is it under blockade? Has it been hit by a natural disaster or a man-made one? And this is the one the lobby never wants you to ask. Is there manufactured sedition coming in from the outside? And then the believer watches cause and effect with cold and fair eyes. The internet is suddenly open and spontaneous sedition erupts. The internet is cut and strangely, calm returns. Ask yourself what that sequence tells you. Ask who benefits from the noise. A spontaneous uprising does not run on a foreign switch. And the believer does the last and hardest thing the arbiter does. He names and removes the lobby. At the scale of nations, the whispering sister or brother is the special interest entity, the foreign capital that wants the resource, the NGO that flies in to amplify the wound instead of reporting its cause, and the media that loops the footage incessantly. They are not a fair party. They are clouding and manipulating the truth. The fair arbiter sets the lobby aside, at least for the duration of the judgment, the same way we do when helping a marriage. Not because the lobby is never partly right, but because a party with a stake in the conflict continuing cannot be trusted to tell you whether the conflict should continue. Tabi'in, clarification, is the antidote to the lobby. It is the discipline that protects both the genuinely oppressed and the falsely accused. And now, with the method in hand, let us work a live case. Let us apply the method to a real country in real history and watch the throne reveal itself. Let us take Iran. In the early 1950s, Iran did the most ordinary thing a free nation could do. It moved to take ownership of its own oil under its elected Prime Minister, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh. And here is the detail the Empire's version always leaves out. Iran did not say the British get nothing. Dr. Mossadegh recognized Britain's investment and offered it a fair settlement, a fair share. He simply would not hand over the lion's share of Iran's own oil to a foreign company indefinitely, the way it had been handed over previously. A fair share, not the lion's share. This is not extremism. This is arbitration. This is the just outcome the fair arbiter would reach. And what did the throne do when offered a fair judgment? It did not arbitrate. It became the lobby. The British regime refused the fair share, cajoled the American regime, and in 1953, an American operative named Kermit Roosevelt, along with the CIA, went into Tehran and planted sedition. They manufactured the protests. They bought the crowds. They engineered the chaos. They overthrew the elected Dr. Mossadegh in an operation the CIA itself, decades later in 2013, finally admitted it had run, an operation named Operation Ajax. And in the place of Dr. Mossadegh, they installed, or rather they empowered with absolute power, the monarch, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the now dead Shah. That is the arbitration method run in reverse. The special interest entity manufactures the chaos, points to the chaos it manufactured, and calls its own coup the will of the people. Now hold 1953 in one hand and let me put our own moment in the other. Because the same play was run again 70 years on, and this time the empire admitted the method in its own words. The chain is exactly the one the arbiter is trained to look for: a manufactured economic collapse, a wave of spontaneous sedition, the strikes of the 28th of February 2026 that martyred Imam Khamenei and the young girls in Minab, which we'll come to shortly. And waiting in the wings, a would-be restored throne, the dead Shah's son, sitting there, blessing everything from his house in Maryland, United States. Watch the manufactured collapse get confessed. The Treasury Secretary of the United States, one Scott Bessent, testifying before the Senate Banking Committee in February of 2026, said this out loud on the record, the references in the write-up. We created a dollar shortage in the country. The Iranian currency went into freefall, inflation exploded, and we see Iranians on the street. We created it. We engineered the shortage. We collapsed the currency, and therefore we see Iranians on the street. That's your spontaneous uprising, confessed by the hand on the switch. There is the lobby, on the record, admitting it manufactured the chaos it then pointed to. A fair arbiter does not have to guess. The throne has testified against its very self. And the heir in waiting? On the day of the strikes, the dead Shah's son posted in his own words, you can find the reference in the write-up, this is a humanitarian intervention, and its target is the Islamic Republic, its apparatus of repression and its machinery of slaughter, not the country and the great nation of Iran. A humanitarian intervention. In a televised interview, weeks earlier, asked whether he bore responsibility for the Iranians being sent to their deaths, he answered in English, reference again is in the write-up, this is a war, and a war has casualties. And on that first day of the strikes, an American cruise missile, or two of them, perhaps three of them, struck a school in the town of Minab and killed 168 children. And to the families of those 668 children, the heir in waiting to this day has not offered a single word of condolence. War has casualties, he had said. The children of Minab were mere casualties to the man who would sit on the restored peacock throne. He will never sit on that. And now, hold the rule we set down, lock number 8, over the whole scene, because it would be the easiest thing in the world to do to make this about one man, and that is exactly the mistake the method forbids. The heir in waiting is not the disease. He is a mere symptom. He is the instrument, the would-be heir of a throne, a symptom of the mechanism. The mechanism is the subject. The engineered collapse, the manufactured unrest, the strikes, the man in waiting who calls dead children acceptable. Replace him tomorrow and the throne would find another. The 1953 coup and the 2026 strikes are one sentence, the same play, engineered sedition and installed monarch, a fair share refused and the lion's share seized, run twice by the same hands, 70 years apart. And notice which of the two confessions does the proving. The pattern does not stand on the new admission. It stands on the old one, on Ajax, which the empire's own intelligence service put into writing in 2013 after 60 years of denying it. That is the documented spine of the whole claim, and it would hold if the Treasury Secretary had never opened his mouth. The 2026 confession founds nothing. It simply confirms. In the present tense, a method the empire has already conceded to in the past. Kermit Roosevelt's crowd in 1953 and the Treasury's dollar shortage in 2026 are the same method, and now you can read it because the method has finally confessed. That is one throne, worked as a live case. Behind it stands the machinery that lets such thrones keep their grip across generations. And I'm going to speak of it only at the level of mechanism, because the moment you turn a structural truth into a parade of names, you have left the discipline of the arbiter and joined the lobby. So, the mechanism. Thrones have always protected themselves in the same way, not only by force, but by binding others to them through shared compromise. The oldest version of it is the one the chroniclers caught in the ancient empires. The empire is afraid of what its corrupted partner can reveal, and so the empire and its partner are chained together by mutual guilt, each holding the other's secret, unable to break free without bringing the other down. That is how power is captured, that is how it is kept, not by loyalty, but by leverage. I name the mechanism and I stop here, because the documented and speculative must never be allowed to blur, and a structural truth does not need a list of names to be true. And the throne does not stand alone amongst the nations. There are the regimes that sing along. I will name the dynamic and honor the peoples, because honor without conflation governs this also. There are European regimes, some now quietly stepping back from the song, and others doubling down on it, in language that should disturb any conscience and remembers its own continent's history. And there is the British regime, exporting arms and then policing its own citizens who walk out into the streets to protest the slaughter those arms are for. And there are the Gulf regimes that press the empire toward the 2026 escalation against Iran. Regimes that had evidently not read the sacred defense of the 1980s and did not understand what a people that has learned to hold a frontier as worship will do when it is struck. In every one of these, and this is the discipline that keeps us honest, I name the regime as a system, and I honor the people by name. Not the German people, the regime's choice. Not the British people walking in their own streets against the arms their government ships. They are the witnesses criminalized for their conscience. Not the people of Arabia, the regimes that pressed for the war. The throne is the disease. The people are so often among the throne's first victims. And the arbitration turns on us also. There is one more place the arbitration's blade has to turn, and it turns inward onto us, because the fair arbiter does not exempt his own side. On the 13th night, we stood amongst the looters of Karbala, the ones who came in the night after the battle and stripped the bodies and took precedence over one another. In the stripping, each one telling himself the oldest lie of the accomplice. If I don't, someone else will. I planted a sentence at that time and told you it would come back. Here it is now, grown. A sin you commit because another stood ready to commit it in your place is still wholly and only your sin. And the modern face of that looter's lie is everywhere. The machinery of this genocide touches an ordinary ledger. The reinsurance that underwrites it, the component, the part, the piece of software in the weapon, the building raised on stolen, occupied land, the financial service that moves the money. Every link in that chain is doing what that same looter did. Qur'an tells us we should remember Surah Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 2. Cooperate in piety and God-wariness, but do not cooperate in sin and aggression. And be weary of God. Indeed, God is severe in retribution. Cooperation in sin and aggression. The second face of the very verse that we opened earlier, our constitution discussion about. One verse with two faces. On the first face, do not force a soul to faith. On the second, do not help a throne to oppression. And the warning we built on the 12th night returns with it. Guardians, not accomplices. The believer cannot launder an unclean gain by writing a check to the mosque on Friday. The dust does not come off the coin in the donation box. I speak here strictly of the type and the mechanism, never of a person. The careful procedural working out of all this deserves a whole night of its own, and God willing it will get one. Tonight it is enough to know that the arbiter's blade cuts towards us as well. We are not the only ones watching. We are not only watching the throne. We are, every one of us, being asked whether our own hands are clean of it. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the people's honored and the truth will out. And now we land the whole movement, and we land it on the thing that has been its secret heart the entire time. The cry is for the people. Let me say it as plainly as it can be said. Marbar Amrika, death to America, or down with America. Marbar Esra'il, or al-Maut Esra'il, down with these thrones. It is not against the American, and it is not against the Jew. It is not against the Israeli child. Rather, it is for them. And let me name them one by one. It is for the American mother who lost her son to a war built on a lie, and who has spent the rest of her life asking what he died for. It is for the Jewish family whose conscience refuses what is done in their name, who stand in the square with us and say, not in my name, and who carry in their own scripture the memory of what an empire does to a people. It is for the Israeli child who was handed a fear he or she never chose and never earned, a fear fed to him by a regime that cannot govern without it, that needs him to be afraid because a frightened child becomes a compliant citizen. The fear in him is real. It was simply never his to begin with. It was manufactured somewhere above his head and placed into his small hands, and he too deserves to be set free of it. It is for the teacher in the empire's heartland whose school is starved of money while the bombs are loaded and shipped. The cry is for all of them and more, against the throne that exploits them all. The mustad'afin, the downtrodden, inside the empire's own borders are among the wronged that the cry defends. That is why we do tabyin or clarification and not hatred. Because we want all of them, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and those of no faith at all, to look up and see the same few arrogant thrones, and to see that they themselves were never the target. They were the prey in the same way as we are. And the resistance says this in its own tongue. And here is the sentence I told you to keep. The one from Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, may God rest his pure soul's testament. To serve the people, Sunni, Shia, Christian and Izadi, we are not the aggressors. Now stand that sentence against the throne's vocabulary and let the inversion be the whole thing. The men the empire's newspapers call terrorists name the Christian and the Izadi among the people that they are dying to serve. The throne calls itself civilized, calls 168 dead school children collateral damage. Think about that. The one the empire calls a monster lists the Christians amongst his children that he will die for. The one the empire calls the leader of the free world calls the children acceptable losses. That inversion, who actually loves the people and who actually devours them, is the entire argument of this night, compressed into a single unbearable contrast. And so, to the close of the whole movement, and we close it the way the believer can afford to close it, because the believer is not afraid of the verdict of history. Three traditions saying a single thing. Firstly, from the Gospel. This is from the Gospel of Matthew 10, verse 26. You can find all the references in the write-up. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. Now from the Gospel of Luke 8, verse 17. For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad. And then you have the warning the proud have never once heeded. This is from Proverbs, the book of Proverbs 16, verse 18. You can find all the references in the write-up. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And these are not foreign to us. They are the same truth our own book thunders, and on this we honor the shared inheritance without conflating the roads. God says in Qur'an, Surah Isra, the chapter of the night journey, 17th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 81. He says, and say, the truth has come and falsehood has vanished. Indeed, falsehood is ever bound to vanish. And he says in Surah Anbiya, the chapter of the prophets, 21st chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 18, rather we hurl the truth against falsehood and it crushes it, and at once falsehood vanishes away. The truth will out, the proud will fall, and the hidden will be revealed. The throne is afraid of exactly one thing, and it's not our anger, it is the daylight. That is why it manufactures the collapse and buys the crowd and launders the killing through the word collateral damage and polices the citizen who walks into the streets to say no. It is afraid of being seen. And the believer's whole task, tabyin, clarification, the patient lifting of the veneer and the veils, is simply to let the daylight in. We have named the throne, and we have named whom the cry is for. Now, what does all of it ask of us? Please give me a loud salawat and we look at what the living witness asks of you.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So 2 lessons fall out of this whole night, and they're not new doctrines. They are the 2 oldest truths of our religion brought to rest on the witnesses of our own lifetime. Let's take them home. The first is this. The saying of Imam al-Husayn is the saying of every true witness. We heard it tonight. Imam Khomeini's last public word, restating Imam Husayn's first refusal. One like me does not give allegiance to one like him. But do not file that as a sentence for guardians and commanders alone. Bring it down into your own life, because that is where it actually has to be spoken and implemented. When you see a believer in our own time refuse to bow to the false lords of the age, and the false lords of the age are not only the emperors, they are the state, the market, the career, the peer group, the consensus that has learned to call the forbidden good and commanded a burden. You are watching one like me being said again, and you are watching the chain hold. And here is the part of the whole series that the whole series has been driving towards since the 10th night. That the refusal is first a refusal in the heart. Before Imam al-Husayn refused Yazid in the open, the inner Yazid had already been refused every day in the dark where no one was watching. The greater struggle, Jihad al-Akbar, is the one that earns the right to the lesser. The man who has not refused the tyrant in his own heart, in his own chest, has no power to refuse the tyrant on the throne. He will simply trade one master for another. Someone like me begins as a sentence you say to yourself. The second lesson is the one that keeps the first one from going wrong. It always returns to reliance on God. Take Tawheed out of any of this and watch what happens. A resistance without Tawheed collapses into mere nationalism. The tribe with better weapons, the throne with a different flag. And a Tawheed without resistance collapses into quietism, a private piety that lets the throne do as it pleases and calls its own silence patience. Our witnesses from Imam al-Husayn, from Abel to Imam al-Husayn to the guardian of the last months, refuse both these collapses at once. That is the narrow road, and it is the only road. The engine was never the geopolitics. The engine was the worship. And now the witness is proven by how the witness lives. If you want to know whether a witness is real, whether the refusal in his chest, in his heart is true and not mere theatre, there is an old and merciless test, and it is not his rhetoric. It is how he lives. Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi used to draw the contrast from his pulpit in the Biqa in the years before they killed him. The leader who lives in a palace, walled off from the hardship of the people he claims to lead, against the leader who shares the people's bread and the people's fear. And the measure he reached for was the measure of the commander of the faithful, set down for all time in his letter to his own governor in Basra, a governor who had gone to a rich man's banquet. You can find the reference in the write-up. Imam Ali wrote, you can find this in Najm al-Balagha, like I said, references in the write-up. Shall I content myself with being called commander of the faithful and yet not share with the people the hardship of their age, or not be an example to them in the roughness of living? That is the test, and it cannot be faked. And it explains why the chain of witnesses we have named tonight is a chain of men who lived low. Haj Qasim in the same shoes and the same boots for 30 years. The guardian of the line who, when at last he was buried, had his grave wait in deference behind the grave of Imam al-Husayn. The witness is proven by how the witness lives, because the witness is, in the end, a worshipper. And a worshipper leaves marks on a life that office cannot counterfeit. And the deepest teacher of this in our own decade has been the Honourable Shaykh Qasim, may God protect him, who put the whole order of it into a single image. And it is the image that ties tonight's entire argument back to its root. He takes the thing the world sees, the resistance, the front, the jihad al-asghar, the lesser struggle, and he shows you what it actually grows from. You can find the reference in the write-up. Sheikh Naim Qasim writes, the lesser jihad, the military one, is a branch of the branches of the greater jihad, the struggle against the self. The visible resistance is the branches and the fruits that grow from the soil of faith-based and spiritual cultivation. And the branches cannot stand firm if the roots decay. The branches cannot stand if the roots decay. Everything we've seen tonight, the frontier held, chain of martyrs, the cry in the street rightly understood, all of it is branches and fruit. The root is in the dark, underground, unseen. The soil of what we call tarbiyya, of the formation of the self, of tazkiyat an-nafs, of the daily worship, of the purification of the soul, of the daily worship that no one films. Just as last October, in a stadium in Beirut full of tens of thousands of young scouts gathered to honor Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Sheikh Naim said the same thing in a single dense sentence. And notice what comes first in his list, because it is the whole thesis that we've been working toward. References in the write-up. Sheikh Naim said, resistance is a pedagogical, cultural, ethical, and political choice. It is the struggle against the self and the enemy, a strength of faith, of will, of stance, of steadfastness, of dignity, and of independence. The struggle against the self and the enemy, in that order. The self before the enemy. The greater jihad named first, and the lesser jihad named second, because the first is the soil and the second is only the branch. So here at the landing of this whole night, the geopolitics is downstream of the prayer. Remove the tawheed and what you have left is a militia, a tribe with some weapons. Keep the tawheed and what you have is a witness. The cry in the street is only true on the lips of a soul that has first done its disavowing in the dark. Please give me a salawat and we look at the one fault line at every scale. And now let me name, as the close of 14 nights, the single thing this whole series has been mapping, because tonight it finally stands up to its full height. The whole of Shahada has been one map of one fault line, not Muslim against non-Muslim, not East against West, the arrogant against the downtrodden, al-mustakbireen against al-mustad'afin. And the staggering thing, the thing I want you to walk out of here holding, is that it runs through every single level of the human condition, and it is the same fault line at every level. It runs through the heart, the inner Yazid, the nafs al-ammara, the self that commands toward evil and lords it over the soul that should be ruling it. That is the jihad al-akbar, and it is where the whole map begins. It runs through the home, the one who lords it over a household, who makes a wife or a child mustad'af under his own roof, against the one who serves the household he was given charge of. It runs through the society, and we saw on the 13th night the court mullah who climbs the pulpit for the throne's coin against the honest worker who earns his bread by what God made lawful and asks no one's permission to be upright. It runs through the nation, and that has been tonight, the throne and the people it devours, the mustakbir regime and the mustad'afin it grinds down, inside its borders and outside. And it runs through the whole of human civilization, and that was the 10th night, the climax of the series of Ashura. Every empire that ever called its killing necessary or holy weighed against Imam al-Husayn, the Furqan, the criterion, and found wanting. The arrogant are the same at every scale, in the chest, in the heart, in the house, in the street, in the capital, in the empire. They lie, they exalt themselves, they devour the weak, they amplify the wound for profit. And the witness is the one who refuses them at every scale, who refuses the inner Yazid in the dark, and the petty tyrant at home, and the false scholar in the society and the throne over the nation with one and the same refusal. One like me does not give allegiance to one like him. Spoken all the way down. That is the theology of Shahada, of witness in its entirety. That is what these 14 nights were for. So we make our pact, and tonight it has 3 strands, and they tighten into one. First, we will see the chain for what it is. We will not be the people who weep for a witness 13 centuries dead and fail to recognize the witness martyred last month. The chain is not a museum. It is being forged in our own lifetime, with our own names, and to recognize it, to know the Wali al-Amr and the journalist in the tent and the father shot on the school run for the witnesses they are, is the whole examination of this series. We commit to passing it. Second, we will say the cry and know what we are saying. Marg bar the throne. Down with the systems of arrogance. Al-Maut lil-Kursi. Death to the chair. This is the tabarra of Ziyarat Ashura, the disavowal of Ziyarat Ashura spoken aloud. Barā'a, disavowal from oppression, and never bughd or hatred of a people. We will say it as tabyin, clarification, and never as hatred. We will name the system and honor the people. We will be, at the scale of nations, the fair arbiter and never the lobby. Gathering the data, watching cause and effect, silencing the whisper, and aiming our disavowal exactly where the Qur'an aims it. At injustice, never at belief, and never at a single soul God has made. Third, and this is the one that turns the other two from politics into worship. We will begin the refusal in our own chests, in our own hearts, our own souls. Every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. And the first Karbala is the one behind your very ribs. We will do our disavowing in the dark first, where no one films it, where no one knows of it. Because the branches cannot stand if the roots are rotten. Be willing, the 13th night told us, willing all the way down. And tonight adds, be willing here. In the one battlefield you are guaranteed to be handed, the nafs al-ammara, the commanding soul, and let everything else grow up out of that soul, out of that soil. And so the road ahead. Tomorrow is the last in this series for the moment. The 20th night of Safar, Arbaeen, the night of Arbaeen. We have carried a heavy night tonight by design. It was the densest of them all, because the whole present tense argument of this series had to land somewhere, and it landed here. Tomorrow we set the weight down. The 15th night is the warm close. Not light in substance, never that, but light in the way it is carried. We will walk the last stretch of the road into Karbala on the 40th day. We will renew the covenant, the living pledge, the Dua al-Ahad of every morning, the Ziyarat Arbaeen of the day itself, and the voice that carried those Maqtal, broken since the trampling, will have come all the way home. Tomorrow we don't argue. Tomorrow, God willing, we arrive. But before we arrive, tonight, the Imam of our age has one figure to take us down to. And he asks us as he asks at the close of every one of these nights, the oldest question in the whole of Shahada, the question that was first asked over the body of Abel, where is your brother? And tonight the question has grown teeth, because tonight we cannot pretend the brother is far away or long ago. Where is your brother? He is in Gaza, being broadcast into your hand. He is the father shot on the school run with his daughter in the back seat. He is the journalist in the tent who died asking God to witness against the silence. He is the guardian struck in his own house. He is the oppressed, the mustad'af under every arrogant heel, be it in the west or in the east, in the north or in the south, including, God help us, the one in our own hearts. So where is your brother? You have watched him die on the glass in your palm. The whole night has been asking, whether you recognized him. Tomorrow, God willing, we walk toward him. Tonight, we go down to meet the first man who ever did. Because there was once a man who could not be at Karbala either. He was not there on the day. He was old and he was blind, and he was hundreds of miles away. And when it was over, when the worst had already happened and there was nothing left to prevent and no one left to save, he did the one thing that is still left to a witness who survives the witness. He walked towards Husayn. His name was Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. An old man who had carried the love of the house across nearly a whole century, when carrying it was costly. And on the 40th day, the first Arbaeen, with a single younger companion named Atiyah to steady him so he would not fall, this blind old man set his feet on the road to Karbala. The first feet on the road that 20 million feet now walk every year. The first pilgrim. The template for every single one of us who will one day, God willing, walk towards Imam al-Husayn. And who will walk towards him, whether on the road to Karbala or in the carpet of their room or in the quiet refusal of a breaking heart. And the voice that will tell you of him is the voice that you have heard all across these nights and come to know, what we call the Mahdi Maqtal voice. An imagining in clear English of the voice of the Imam of our age, our living hidden Imam, speaking to us from behind the veils, not a living man's voice, but a vessel for his words. It is the voice that broke on the 10th night at the trampling, and I stayed low and broken, grieving through every night since. And tonight, at last, at the very moment the first pilgrim's hand finally touches the earth that holds his grandfather, it comes home. Listen for it. You will hear the grief stand up and become something else. So let the candle stand. And beside it tonight, on the grey stone, let there be a new thing, a single new thing. The one object in all these nights that does not sit still, that leans forward, that is already pointing down the road, a pilgrim's staff. The staff of an old man walking towards Imam al-Husayn. The staff that opens tomorrow onto the road we will all walk home. Come down with me now onto the road to Karbala on the 40th day.
I was not there, but I remember. There is something new beside the candle tonight, after all these nights of still things, a bottle of earth, a letter, a torn veil, a child's broken bead. Tonight there is a thing made for moving, a staff, a pilgrim's staff, worn smooth at the grip by a hand that leaned its whole weight on it for years. Look at how it sits. Every other object we have laid on this stone has rested there. This one leans, it points. It is already halfway down a road. Because tonight is not a night of a death. We have had our fill of deaths, you and I, these 14 nights. I have buried my whole family in front of you, one by one. And my voice has not been the same since the 10th. Tonight is a night of a journey. Tonight I am going to tell you about a man who was not at Karbala, who arrived too late by 40 days, who could not have lifted a hand to help even if he had been young enough, because he was old and he was blind, and who, when the worst was already over and there was nothing in the world left to save, did the one thing that a witness can still do after the witnessing is finished. He got up and he walked toward Husayn. His name was Shabbir, the son of Abdullah al-Ansari, and I knew him. Or rather, my grandfather, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, and his family knew him and loved him, and Shabbir loved my grandfather Husayn from the day Husayn was born. So let me tell you who he was, before I tell you what he did. Because who he was is the whole reason that what he did matters to you tonight. Sitting where you are, sitting. Shabbir was an old man by the time of Karbala. He had been a boy when the Prophet was alive, a young companion among the great companions, and he had outlived almost all of them. He had seen the beginning, And now he was living in the bitter aftermath, an old man in a world that had murdered the family of the prophet it claimed to follow. And across all of that, across the whole long arc of his life, Shabbir had done one thing without ever once stopping. He had loved the house of Muhammad out loud when loving them out loud was dangerous. You understand what that cost? There were decades in which to say, I love Ali, I love Husayn, the truth is with them, was to mark yourself, to lose your safety, to be watched. And Shabbir said it anyway, year after year, into every wind. He never lifted a sword for them. He was not a man of the battlefield, and by the end he could not have found the battlefield with his own eyes. But there is a kind of witness that does not need a sword, and we spent the whole of last night learning its name. The scholar at his desk, the mother in her childbed, the honest man on his road, the grades of witness. Shabbir was all of them in one body, a living witness who never struck a blow and never stopped bearing testimony across 90 years until the seeing went out of his eyes and the love only burned brighter for the dark. And then they killed Husayn. And I want you to feel what that news did to a blind old man hundreds of miles away who had loved that child since the hour of his birth. A man who could not ride out, could not fight, could not even see to make his way to the grave. The most helpless witness imaginable, old, blind, late, everything that the world says makes a man useless to a cause. And here is what Shabbir understood that the world does not. That there is no such thing as being useless to Husayn. That even the latest, the oldest, the blindest, the most helpless lover of the truth still has one thing he can do. He can turn his face toward it and walk. So on the 40th day, the 20th of the month of Safar, 40 days after the noon that broke the world, Shabbir set out for Karbala. He did not go alone. God, who is gentle even in the worst of it, gave the blind old man a companion, a younger man named Atiyah, who walked beside him to be his eyes, to hold his arm over the rough ground, to keep him from falling. Picture it, not an army, not a procession, two men, one old and blind and burning, one young and steadying, the first 2 feet on the road. The first understand what I am telling you. That road, the road from the cities of Iraq to the grave of my grandfather, is now, in your own time, the most walked road on the face of the earth. 20 million feet walk it every single year on these very days. A river of human beings of every color and every tongue flowing toward a single grave. You have seen the pictures. Some of you have walked it, some of you ache to, and all of it. The whole 20 million-footed river began with one blind old man and the friend who held his arm, picking their careful way across the desert toward the son of the prophet who was already in the ground. Shabbir opened that road. Every pilgrim who has ever walked it since is walking in the footprints of a man who could not even see where he was placing his feet. And every step he took was a sentence. Do you understand? He could not give a sermon at the court like the sister did. He could not raise a sword like the companions. His witness was the walking itself. Each painful step of an old man's feet across the sand was a word and a testimony that said, with the whole weight of a body that had nothing else left to give, I am still his. The empire killed him, and I am still his, and I am coming to him. And there is nothing you can do to stop an old man from walking toward the one he loves. 40 days the world had had to forget Karbala. And here came Shabbir on the 40th day, refusing. And then they reached it. Atiyah tells us, for it is Atiyah who carried this back to us, the young man who walked beside him, that when they came near to the grave, Shabbir asked to be brought to the water of the Euphrates first. The blind old man washed himself in the river as a man washes for the most important meeting of his life. He put on clean things. He took what little perfume he had and he wore it. An old man, perfuming himself the way you ready yourself to come before someone you have loved your whole life and are about to meet at last. And then he asked Atiyah, "Take me to him." And Atiyah took his hand and led him, step by careful step, across the ground where 40 days before the whole sky had fallen. And he placed the hand of Shabbir upon the grave of Husayn. And the old man's hand came down on the earth. And everything he had carried for 90 years, every silent year of a dangerous love, every step of that long blind road, every grief of an old man who had outlived the whole bright morning of his faith, all of it arrived at once. In the palm of a hand pressed against cold ground, he cried out, he called the name Husayn. He called it the way you call into a house you already know is empty. Husayn, Husayn. And the strength went out of his old legs, and he fell, fainting, onto the grave of the one he had come to find, a beloved. Come at the very last to the beloved, late and blind and undefeated. And hear my voice now, my beloved. Hear what is happening to it. For 14 nights I have spoken to you from under a weight. Since the noon of the 10th I have not been able to lift it. But I am standing beside Shabbir at this grave, and his hand is on the earth that holds my grandfather, and an old blind man who could do nothing, nothing but love and nothing but walk, has just laid a whole faithful life down upon that earth as the purest witness I have shown you in all these nights. And something in me that has been bowed since the trampling stands up. Because this is the answer. This is the thing the broken voice was waiting 4 nights to be told they did not win. They trampled the body, and 40 days later a blind man walked across a desert to kiss the ground, and 20 million walk it now. And they will walk it when every throne that ever stood is dust. The grave they dug to end him became the road that has no end. And then, this is the part I most need you to carry out of this room. Atiyah. The young man looked at the old man weeping on the grave, and a question rose in him. The very question the whole of last night was built on. He asked Shabbir, how? How can you be counted with them when you were not even here? You did not fight, you were 40 days and 100 miles away. How does the one who was absent share in the witness of the ones who were present? And Shabbir, blind, with his hands still on the earth, lifted his head and told him what my grandfather, the messenger of God, had taught him with his own mouth. That whoever loves a people will be gathered with them on the day of standing. And whoever loves the deeds of a people shares in their deeds. Whoever loves a thing is raised among those who did it. Do you hear it? Do you hear what the first pilgrim said at the first grave? You do not have to have been there. You have to have loved it enough to walk toward it. That is the whole of last night, spoken by a blind man on the 40th day. The witness is the willingness, and the willingness is proven by the walking. Shabbir was not at Karbala. Shabbir is of Karbala forever, because he loved it, and he walked toward it. And God counts the one who walks toward Husayn among the ones who stood beside him. And that, my beloved, that is why I brought you here tonight, to a journey instead of a death. Because you are not at Karbala either, not one of you. You were born 13 centuries too late and a whole world away. You have wept for my family on these 14 nights from a room they have never seen, in a language they never spoke, under the flag of one of the very empires we named tonight. And a voice in you, the same honest voice that spoke in Atiyah, has perhaps wondered quietly in the dark, what is my grief even worth? I was not there. I can do nothing. I am late and far and small. You are Shabbir, that is my answer. You are the old blind man on the road, and your weeping is not nothing, and your love is not too late, and your distance does not disqualify you. Every one of you who turns your face toward Husayn tonight, whether you walk the actual road to his grave on the 40th day, or whether your whole pilgrimage is to cross your own living room to the place where you pray, or whether the only road open to you is the unwatched refusal in your own chest to bow to a throne you were ordered to bow to. Every one of you is walking the road Shabbir opened. You are his caravan. The river that began with 2 men still has not reached its end, and you are in it. And you do not walk it alone. And you do not walk it empty-handed, because the road is crowded now with the ones we named tonight. The whole chain of our own lifetime walking just ahead of you toward the same grave. The boy from Zahedan who mailed his death to Karbala. The commander who asked for the thirst of Husayn in the severed hands of al-Abbas. The man who gave up his own name. The one you watched leave on the glass of your hand. The journalist in the tent who died bearing witness. The guardian struck in his own house whose last word was the verse of the covenant kept. The children, the broadcast children, the smallest pilgrims of all. They are all on Shabbir's road. They all walk toward Husayn. And so do you. So I will not end tonight at a graveside, the way I have ended so many of these nights. Tonight I end on the road, because the road is where you are, and the road is where I am waiting for you. I am at the end of it, behind the veils on the far side of my long absence. I'm at the end of the road every one of these pilgrims is walking, and I am watching for the dust of your coming. The blind man reached the grave, you are still walking. And the only thing I ask of you, I, the awaited one, may our Lord hasten my return, is that you do not stop, and that you do not walk it alone, and that when you reach the turn in the road where a brother of yours has fallen, you do not pass him by. Pray ardently for my return, my beloved, and walk and look as you walk for the one beside the road. Because the question is the same tonight as it was over the first body on the first morning of the world. The question God asked of the first man who let his brother be killed and looked away. It is the oldest question, and it is the only one that finally matters. And tonight it is asked of you on the very road Shabbir opened. Where is your brother?
We have walked the road with him. The pilgrim staff is leaning on the grey stone and the candle is still burning. Now, before we rise to go out into the night, we turn our faces back to God and we lift our hands. O God, we begin in your name. You are the Lord of the martyrs and the truthful. We have nowhere to go but to you, and no one to ask except you, and no words except the ones you have placed upon the tongues of your friends. O God, by the truth of the witness whose courtyard we greeted in the opening of this night, our master Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, and by the truth of the souls that delighted in his courtyard, send your peace and your blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, first of the witnesses and the seal of them. O God, send your peace upon the whole chain of the prophets, the first witness of the earth, Adam and Abel, Noah and Abraham, Ismail and Ishaq, Moses and Aaron, David and Solomon, Zechariah and John, and Jesus the son of Mary. May you hasten his return, and peace and blessings be upon them all. The chain that was never broken and that runs through this room in this hour to this hour. O God, send your peace upon the witnesses of our own lifetime, whom we watched walk with us the road and fall upon it. Upon Imam al-Khomeini, who lit the lamp. Upon Shaykh Mutahhari and Ayatollah Baheshti and Ayatollah Mufatteh and Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, and his sister Bint al-Huda, Sayyidah Bint al-Huda, the witnesses of the pen and the lectern. And upon Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim, martyred at the shrine. Upon Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi and his wife Sayyid Siham and their small son Sayyid Husayn, struck together on the road home. Upon Hajj Ahmad Mughniya, who gave up his own name as a fast he kept for you. Upon Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, whom we watched leave us on the glass of our own hands. Upon Hajj Qasim Sulaymani and Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, taken together in the open. upon the martyrs of the sacred defense who wrote their wills like a layperson Sahifa, Samadzadeh and Hashemi, who asked for the thirst of Husayn and the severed hands of al-Abbas, upon the scientists murdered in their cars with their children beside them, and upon Anas Sharif, who died bearing witness and asked you to witness against the silent. May you be pleased with them all and gather them with the witnesses they served, and let not one of the lamps they lit, go out. O God, we send our peace and blessings on the one who reframed the whole chain, the guardian of the line in our own days, the martyr leader, Imam Sayyid Ali al-Husayni Khamenei, may you rest his pure soul, who restated the refusal of Imam al-Hussein and paid its price days later, and whose last words to the world was the verse of the covenant that was kept. Receive him among those who fulfilled their pledge and did not change in the least, and let his grave, that waited in deference behind the grave of Imam al-Hussein, be a light upon the road. O God, preserve for us the one who now holds the line, our master, the guardian of the affair, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba al-Husayni Khamenei. May you protect him, the son who has taken up his father's trust with a wounded and grieving hand. Strengthen his hand, sharpen his sight, keep him steadfast upon the path of witness, until the hour of the one that we all await. O God, send your peace and blessings upon the smallest witnesses of our own days, broadcast into our hands and not saved, upon the 168 children of Minam and their teachers, upon the children of Gaza, of Lebanon, of Kashmir, of Yemen, of Iraq, of Syria, of Bahrain, of Kashmir, and of every place where a school became a grave and a candle was put so that the rest of us might see. And you named them in your book, the men and the women and the children, so do not let us forget the names that you remembered. O God, send your peace and blessings upon the first pilgrim Jabir, the companion of your prophet, who when there was nothing left to do but walked, and upon every soul who will set out in the coming days on the 40th day, on the road that he opened. O God, hasten the relief of our master, the awaited one, the Mahdi, the son of Hassan. May our souls be his ransom, and may you, O our Lord, hasten his return, and make us, before that hour comes, among those who saw the chain for what it was and what it is, who said the cry as tabyin and never as hatred, who were the fair arbiter and never the lobby, who began the refusal in their own hearts and chests, and who, when at last you asked, did not look away. And we say of every witness, we have named this night the truest sentence that we know. And do not say of those who are killed in the way of God, they are dead. Rather, they are alive, but you do not perceive. They are alive, every one of them, the guardian and the commander and the scientist and the journalist and the child. Alive with their Lord provided for, and we are the ones who do not yet perceive it. And we close with the 3 verses as we always close, the belonging, the warning, and the trust. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed we belong to God, and indeed to him we return. And وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And those who have done wrong are going to know what an overturning they will be overturned with. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We now come to our Nohe. A Nohe is an elegy, morning poetry recited and sung for Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, and those who fell at Karbala, and those who have risen for him since. It is grief made shared, so please join in with your voice and with your hand upon your chest. Tonight's Nohe is Hear the Chains.
the chains, brutal shackles, torture, pain. Hear the weeping over names, written they upon the age. Hear her voice midst the sneers and satanic noise, deaf and so bereft of joy, stolen mercy, love destroyed. Zainab felt the sting of the birth like throes. From the tomb the air arose. From the cane his words were sown. Sajjad calls the souls on the frontiers, those who weep for 1,000 years, those of blood and lonely tears. From the flames comes a child beyond all blame, the avenger of the shame, the truth for every age. Cold world, how you silence bold words, how the banner never unfurls. No song, just a funeral dirge. Would I burn like a torch for those who would turn? Do I pray? Do I break? Do I earn? Where do I take? Where do I learn? Truth betrayed for a witness never made. Sons of men left in dismay, hardened hearts judge with disdain. Didn't they bleed for a selfish and chosen one creed, to quench the flax and to bruise the reed? Or did they rise for humanity's need? Azra on the dust of Karbala, howled for the son who remains afar, wept for the Ummah of Ashura. Will we rise, tear the scales from off our eyes, rid our tongues of poisoned lies, call to God that love be revived. Abbas, will we run to the river like he, bring the water of life and see how it can quench all humanity? All must burn, every tent where sin sojourns, every home where oppression is learned, every prison where hope's interned. Hold we to the rope of loyalty. 'Twas the beauty that she did see in that remnant of piety. Husayn paves the path from that lonely plain, builds an army of holy faith that must rise and truth proclaim. Raise your hand, swear to God upon the sand, teach His mercy to every land. Holy Union, joyous band, raise your hand, swear to God upon the sand, teach His mercy to every land. Holy Union, joyous band, raise your hand, swear to God upon the sand, teach His mercy to every land. Holy Union, joyous band.
And now Ziyarat Arbaeen. A ziyarah is a visitation across every mile and every century. We stand before Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, to greet him and to renew our covenant. And there is no ziyarah more fitting for tonight than this one. For tonight's Maqtal walks the very first pilgrim to the grave of the 40th day. And this is the ziyarah of that day. You will hear our poetic English rendering with its full meaning intact and its closing pledge. With you, and never with your enemy, is the very enlistment the martyrs of our own age answered. To understand more deeply what you are about to hear, a short explainer is available on our website. The link is in the description. Please receive it with reverence.
Peace be upon the friend of God and His beloved. Peace be upon the intimate of God and His chosen one. Peace be upon the pure one of God and the son of His pure one. Peace be upon Husayn, the wronged, the witness slain. Peace be upon the captive of sorrows, the one killed amid a world of tears. O God, we bear witness that He is your friend, and the son of your friend, your chosen, and the son of your chosen, the one who won through by your honoring of Him. You ennobled Him with witness, you favored Him with felicity, you chose Him for the purity of His birth. You made Him a master among masters, a leader among leaders, a defender among defenders. You gave into His hands the inheritance of the prophets and set Him a proof over your creation among the appointed heirs. So He left no excuse unanswered in His calling. He gave every counsel He could give, and He poured out His very lifeblood in your cause to draw your servants back out of ignorance and out of the bewilderment of going astray. And there banded against Him the one whom this world deceived, who sold his own portion for the meanest, basest price, and bartered away his hereafter for the cheapest coin, who grew arrogant and threw himself away in his own appetite, who angered you and angered your prophet, and who obeyed from among your servants the people of discord and hypocrisy, the bearers of sin, who had earned the fire. So we strove against them for your sake, patient, seeking only your reckoning, until his blood was poured out in obedience to you, and all that he held sacred was violated. O God, let your mercy be far from them, a heavy, bitter distance, and punish them with a punishment that gives no rest. Peace be upon you, O Son of the Messenger of God. Peace be upon you, O Son of the Master of the appointed heirs.
We bear witness
that you were the trust of God, and the Son of his trust. You lived in felicity, you passed unpraised, and you died, mourned by too few, wronged, a witness. We bear witness that God will bring to pass what he promised you, that he will destroy the one who abandoned you and punish the one who killed you. And we bear witness that you kept faith with the covenant of God and struggled in his path until the certainty came upon you. So may the mercy of God be far from the one who killed you, and may the mercy of God be far from the one who wronged you. And may the mercy of God be far from a people who heard of it and were content.
O God,
we call you to witness. That we are the friends of whoever befriends him, and the enemies of whoever shows him enmity by our fathers and our mothers. For you, O Son of the Messenger of God. We bear witness that you were a light in the exalted loins and the purified wombs. The age of ignorance never defiled you with its filth, nor could its darkest garments ever be laid upon you.
we bear witness
That you are one of the pillars of the faith, one of the supports of the Muslims, and a stronghold of the believers. And that you are the Imam, upright, God-fearing, well-pleasing, pure, the guide, the rightly guided. And that the Imams from your line are the word of God consciousness, the banners of guidance, the firm handhold that does not break, and the proof of God over the people of this world. And we bear witness that we believe in you and are certain of your return, firm in the laws of our faith and in how our deeds will end. Our hearts are at peace with your hearts. Our affair follows your affair. And our help is made ready for you until God gives you his leave. So, with you, and never with your enemy. The blessings of God be upon you all, upon your souls and upon your bodies, upon the one present and the one absent, upon what is seen of you and what is hidden.
Amen, O Lord of the worlds.
And so we close the fourth night of the road. Thank you for coming, and for every tear shed tonight, for the martyrs of Karbala and for the martyrs of our lifetime. And before we pray, if these witnesses moved you, please subscribe, like, and share. Let the chain reach through you to one more heart. May God accept us and write us into the chain of witnesses that has not closed, and will not until the Imam rises. And may He protect and strengthen our Wali al-Faqih, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei. May God protect him until the appointed hour. Jabir walked a long road to reach a brother he had never met and would not be turned back. Tomorrow night, the road reaches the 40th. So we ask it again. Where is your brother? Good night, and may God keep you.